We are blessed today to have one of our local friends, Dave Zahl, who runs the Mockingbird Ministries and does college ministry at Christ Church downtown. He is not just our Rector's Forum guest today, but also our preacher. He's already preached at the 8:15, and he'll be preaching at the 10:30 service as well. And Dave, you've written a number of books, which I can see some of them are over there. And your most recent book is called The Big Relief, and he has plenty of copies if you'd like to purchase them at the end. And you focus in your ministry with Mockingbird and in your books on the centrality of grace and how grace meets our deepest needs in this life. This book is entitled The Big Relief. Well, I think the first question I'd like to ask you is, what do we need relief from? Why is the big relief necessary?
Well, thanks for having me back, Justin.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's fun to be here. I came all the way from Wesley, so it was a long drive on a... what do we need relief from? So the book catalogs the various pressures that we live under. And I'm a middle-aged guy living in Charlottesville, Virginia, so these are going to be pressures that are fairly particular to my context, but I also travel around a lot and I get to observe the culture. So my sense is that the world is a pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker in Charlottesville, certainly. And Charlottesville is this place, that's wild, so comfortable and affluent, and everyone gets stars in their eyes talking about it. And yet to be here is to feel the pressure to keep up, the pressure to always be improving, the pressure to be growing. For churches, this is a big pressure. The pressure to succeed, to be productive, the pressure exerted upon a person by their past, and to sort of deal with what has come before, the pressure of regret, the pressure of guilt. These are all pressures I think we contend with as contemporary people. The internet has made it harder to escape the past, and it's made your transgressions are ever present. I also have worked with the students at UVA for a long time, and there's an accelerating pressure to achieve more quickly. And so that's my sense and experience of contemporary life is of a treadmill getting faster. And that has to do with travel sports just as much as it does to do with a 401k. It's more, sooner.
It strikes me that in that list, some of those anxieties, we'll call them, have been around forever, right? Certainly guilt and a pained conscience and all of that. But some of them that you mentioned do seem quite particular to at least certain kinds of subcultures in America, and perhaps the subculture that we have here in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. One that you mentioned was maximization of your productivity, that you don't want to squander or waste any aspect of your time or your life, but you need to pump out as much product, so to speak, and development of yourself in that. It's a very sort of capitalistic notion in a way. And the other that you highlighted, which I certainly see a lot of, is status anxiety. It's one of the chapters in your book that in many ways people feel that their sense of self and who they are is shaped by their relationship to other people on some sort of status hierarchy. And people call this the meritocratic culture, right? That's another term for what we're describing. Can you say a little bit more about those two dimensions, about the need to be more productive and status anxiety?
Sure. Let me just say that the different dimensions I explore in terms of pressures and the way that grace sort of answer those pressures, different ones are going to speak to different people at different times. So I did try to be cast as wide a net as I could while also being authentic to my own experience. Productivity is a mandate that I have seen in myself and with my kids that the after-school hours are not to be squandered, especially once they reach, it used to be you reached middle school, and then you had to sort of get serious about a sport or about whatever you're going to be pursuing for your college transcript. But now it's, second grade, if not before that. So that makes me sad as a person who thinks that the most important things in life are generally not on your college transcript. The people that love you and that you love, and that the amount you're able to give to those around you, and just all the God, the spiritual life. So I see that as a pernicious force that has always been there. We've always wanted to justify our lives according to some metric of output.
Right.
And I don't think work or producing things is bad. But when that becomes the only way to evaluate your life, it becomes very thin. That's a very thin metric.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of other things going on in life. And there's a lot of reasons why people can or can't produce as much.
Right.
So there's that. The other one was status anxiety. I mean, I think Charlottesville is a place that's very status conscious, and it's a no-fly zone in a lot of ways, which is why we need to fly there. But that has everything to do with your own understanding of your value as relates to other people. And every society is status conscious. I mean, you go to the inner city in San Paulo, there's going to be a different ladder of status, but it will just be pronounced. But I feel that the gospel, the grace of God, addresses that status anxiety pretty much head on. It says you are not who you see yourself to be, but who God sees you to be, and that status is a gift that we receive rather than something we establish through our sweat and hard work. So it's a reframing that said, I possibly it's just my stage in life, but I see people as tremendously anxious about where they stack up.
Yeah.
And the subtext of so many conversations is where did your kids go to school? Where are you going on vacation? What church do you go to? What car do you drive? Those are all status conversations that are happening underneath. And that's a really exhausting way to live.
It sounds like maybe one way we could think about this is that there are a variety of ways in which we try to define ourselves. And I'm somebody who believes what Bob Dylan said in one of his songs, you got to serve somebody. We're all, in a sense, religious, whether we realize it or not. We all have a God. And there are lots of gods out there that people in our culture, in this group, in this area, could give into and begin to sort of orient their life around and worship. And we've listed many of those. But the implication is that may work for a little while, but inevitably it doesn't fill your soul, right? It doesn't calm a restless heart, right? As St. Augustine talked about the restless heart. That you don't have that peace that passes all understanding. So that takes us then to the next question of the relief, right? We feel like we've got this pressure on us from all of these different gods that we're encouraged to worship. And we might get to the place, hopefully we eventually do, where we realize, this God is not delivering, right? And I feel more anxious, less happy, more stressed out. What's the relief? How does that come in?
Well, the book was written because I kept hearing this word relief everywhere. I heard it in terms of allergies and disasters relief, and I heard it in terms of, finding childcare for your kid.
Very difficult.
Very difficult. And I started to hear it from pretty much every demographic I could imagine. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, it's such a relief, such a relief. Oh, we got this appointment we were waiting for. It's such a relief. This check arrived. It's such a relief." And so I thought to myself, "Gosh, this word seems to connote good things for folks that they're desperate for. It takes a different form for everyone." So my sense is that the grace of God is the great answer to the pressure that we live under. Not pressure, not just from the world, this arbitrary, cruel, kind of moving target pressure, but the pressure that we live under as a result of sin and as a result of death. I mean, death is a huge pressure.
Yeah.
You better get it done now.
Yeah.
Cannot wait till tomorrow. So, to my ears and eyes, if it's true that the spiritual condition of contemporary people is that we're living under a lot of demand, and that folks are dying for some relief, some room to breathe, then how does the Christian faith address that?
Yeah.
And my sense was that it addresses it first and foremost through the grace of God, which is that God is a giver of gifts. God is the great, we're talking about it today.
Yeah.
Gift with no strings attached is one euphemism for grace. I say God's grace is the big relief at the heart of the Christian faith. But grace is one-way love. Grace is unmerited favor. Grace is all of these things that we're pining for, that we have a hard time believing, but that is absolutely central to what we're trying to do.
Right.
I mean, what are we doing? Every week we're coming with outstretched hands and we're receiving what God has to give us.
Yeah.
And we're still on the same level. And it doesn't matter what you've done or left undone that week. Those things are painful. You'll bring them to the table, but you are there to receive what God has to give you, which is forgiveness, absolution, love, imputation, righteousness, all of the things that I try to catalog in this book. So I hope it scratches the itch. I mean, my project, from what I've been trying to do for the last 15 years, is really to translate the core claims of the Christian faith into contemporary language.
Right.
So I don't think you're going to find anything in any of these books that is novel or breaking news, but it will hopefully wipe the dust off of some of the antiquated language that we use, and say, hey, these things we talk about on Sunday, they're actually of pressing, urgent concern for you today in your own life, that is like a treadmill, and a ladder getting longer and a treadmill getting faster.
Yeah, and I mean, it strikes me, Dave, that what you're doing is so important because it's showing that Christianity, this thing that's been around for 2,000 years, is not old and stodgy and irrelevant, right? That it speaks to the deepest concerns and anxieties of our life now, right? It's not just something that people did in the past. And you're also helping us as a society, as a community, learn what Christianity actually teaches. So I was struck by this. Maybe you saw this event. President Trump, a couple of weeks back, he began to reflect about his own mortality. Do you remember this? Did you hear this? And he said, I'm not sure I'm going to get to heaven.
Yeah, that dude.
And the implication of how he framed it was, well, God is kind of weighing my life, the goods, the bads, and, maybe the goods don't outweigh the bad, something like that. I think this is a very common way that people think about salvation, about eternal life, about their relationship with God. But your project is to, in a sense, subvert that common way of thinking and say that's actually not the Christian message, right? Not at all. The Christian message is that you have been given this unwarranted, unearned, not at all tied to your deeds or your actions or even like your feelings about things, gift of new life, eternal life with God. It's just freely given, right? Your comment about communion made me think of Martin Luther, who wrote at the very end of his life, we are beggars on a piece of paper, right? We're all beggars in a sense. We're not deserving of this in some way that we can weigh in a scale, but we're asking for God to look upon us with grace and with favor and love. My sense is that actually many people don't know that that's the Christian message. They think the Christian message is more about, well, God is watching me at all times, and making sure that I'm doing, it's sort of like Santa Claus, right? Keeping a list. Has that been your experience in your work with the college students and people in Charlottesville that they don't really understand what the core good news is?
Yes, I think it's not just a local instinct, it's a universal instinct that we think the good people get the good stuff and the bad people get the bad stuff.
Right.
And that's a karmic circular exchange that a lot of life does operate that way. But the miracle of the gospel is this word that God doesn't actually operate that way.
Right.
God does not think the way you think.
Yeah.
And that's foreign, but also really, if there's to be any hope, it has to be in a God who's not like us.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to draw out. Exactly that. The knee-jerk understanding of Christianity is always as it's a religion of good people trying to get better, rather than real people coping with their failure to be good. And that's, I think, that church is the place you go. Justin is your local forgiveness person.
Yeah.
That's an amazing relief valve
Right.
in a culture that is always trying to exact more in less time.
Right.
And so I think it's this unbelievable resource that the church is sitting on this pile of gold that a lot of times it is responsible for obscuring the message. So I don't want to. It's the fault is not elsewhere.
Right.
But then the great question of life, which I pose to the students when I get the chance to, is what if you were approaching life from approval rather than for it? What would life look like if you were not approaching every single thing about it in order to receive love, but from the vantage point of prior belovedness?
Yeah.
And so that to me is a euphemism for freedom, but it's the great question. It's a scary question because it dismantles some of the hierarchies that we cling to tell us who we are. But I also think it's an exciting question, and usually the answers have to do with the gifts God has given us individually.
Yeah.
And but if you're habituated to achievement, performance, which is what we are habituated to, it comes as a great shock and disorienting announcement. And that's why it's so counterintuitive that we need to talk about it every single 7 days.
Yeah. Well, let's say more about that. Let's explore what happens when you start with your belovedness, right? How does that change you spiritually, psychologically, emotionally? And how does it change how you live your life? What are the fruits, so to speak, of that first principle of I'm not trying to earn God's favor. I'm already a beloved child of God through the grace of God. How does that change you? What does that look like?
Well, I think it frees you to not to be so self-involved. I mean, like the neurotic Christian is often someone who is constantly taking their internal temperature. How am I doing today with God? Where do I stand today? And it's like it's like a marriage. If your spouse is always being like, where are we today? Like, what's going on? Or, do you like me today? Do you not like me? I mean, that's a person you immediately don't like, right? I need to go to the other room right now. So that is not our relationship with God is sort of and hopefully our relationship with our spouse occasionally is there's a foundation of love. So you start to think, well, some questions have been answered as relates to my ultimate value and security. And so now I'm free to see how I can serve my neighbors. Hey, what do they actually need? Rather than how does my ability to serve them actually serve me? It's like, what do they actually need? Right. I think that's a big part of it. I think creativity is a big, usually people feel creative to the extent that they're in touch with what they want to express rather than what they feel they should express in order to gain approval. The greatest creative voices are all those who've somehow been able to silence the pleasing and sort of channel something authentic to themselves. So I think charity, creativity, laughter. You're free to take yourself a little less seriously.
Right.
And that's not, unfortunately, what Christians are usually known for. But the Christians that I know and respect, and the saints that I've truly met in my life, they're almost always very funny, or light.
Yeah.
There's a lightness to them that is usually learned through some form of suffering, at which point they discovered that God was still there. So these are heavy things to talk about on a Sunday morning, but that's why we come.
Yeah.
And so those humor, charity, and creativity are just three off the top of my head. But I think a life lived from the perspective of grace rather than for it is radically reorienting and just energizing too. You're drained. I think you're usually drained to the extent to which judgment is present in a relationship or a creative pursuit or a ministry pursuit. The people that I know who are energized are all those who somehow have been able to, the voices of judgment have fallen away a little bit.
So it's a liberation at its core, to be kind of who God fully calls you to be, right? Whether it's in your charitable activities or your creative endeavors or just the joy of life. Just
spiritually too, though. I mean, you want to get close to a God who's like this.
Yeah.
You don't want to keep your distance.
Yeah.
Hold your cards close to your chest.
Yeah.
I think that if the spiritual life is really the most important aspect of life, and I truly believe that, our God concept is tremendously important. And so if you have a God concept that is God is a oppressive, wagging finger, distant father from your childhood,
Right.
that's going to be, you're going to not ever tell the truth. You're going to curate and hide. And I think that real intimacy with God is usually born out of some kind of grace and a discovery that, oh my gosh, this is who Jesus is. This is what Jesus says about God, or this is what Jesus as the revelation of God, what that means. That's deeply exciting.
Yeah. Dave, you mentioned earlier social media and the way in which social media has played into some of the pressures that we face in our society. Can you say some more about that? We've spent a lot of time in this space thinking about social media, thinking about AI, a lot of these technological developments. How do you see those developments playing out in terms of the pressures of our life?
Well, I see social media right now. I mean, unfortunately, it's the world in which we actually live. So if you want to absent yourself and live in the mountains and never deal with social media, you're probably on the wisest possible track. However, if you want to live in the world and relate to your actual children who are going to real schools, you have to have some kind of, you're dragged into this mess.
So our kids have to have Instagram, is what you're saying?
I think that social media, if you were to try to design something to make people feel anxious and afraid and to discourage them from focusing on true things, social media is close to what you would come up with. But I say that as a person who has used social media in my ministry for years and has watched it bear all sorts of fruit. And I've met great friends through these tools. So I do believe on a fundamental level, technology is a tool. The system through which these platforms have been built has been to leverage our dopamine and basically feed you only the stuff that makes you most upset and the worst possible picture of the other side, or et cetera. And it does that for kids too. So I feel like we're living through a Wild West phase that we will all deeply regret one day, like we do. We'll view it as we do smoking. But in the meantime, you either try to live out some form, bear witness online to some kind of larger reality and the grace of God and some other way of being in the world, or you cede the territory entirely, which I don't feel is the right thing either. But I wouldn't say that to engage in social media as it really is to know that you have to, eyes wide open, there's going to be a cost to you physically, spiritually, to this endeavor. That said, I mean, I see like the work that Jonathan Haidt's been done over the years, and we've had, my kids have been in 3 different schools in this, they've been in a bunch of different schools in this community, and I was noticing 3 years ago how Covenant, which is more, conservative, and Charlottesville Day School, which is more progressive, and then Ivy Elementary, which is more sort of middle of the road, like all 3 of them were having people read Jonathan Haidt's book. And I thought to myself, wow, we can't agree on anything except for the fact that social media is destroying our lives. And that's good, because all of them have, Henley, when my son graduated from there, they weren't allowed to have phones. I thought that was a really constructive, positive thing. And that gave me great hope that there's still consensus available to us.
Yeah, that is certainly a bipartisan issue. And you, in your sermon today, you talk a little bit about partisanship. And of course, we have an election coming up in 48 hours, I guess. How do you think about the role of partisanship, the kind of tribalism that we see, which often feels almost religious in nature, as a sort of a good versus evil, apocalyptic kind of vibe to it? How do you see that playing into the pressures that grace is a relief of?
Well, let me say, I don't think either party has the market cornered on the grace of God. And that's that shouldn't be a radical thing to say. Right. That's been true. Any study of history would show you that things wax and wanes, and what was once blue is now red, and what was once red is now blue. It changes. It changes within my lifetime. That doesn't mean the distinctions aren't important. I'm not a hyper-partisan person, mainly because I'm trying to maybe naively focus on more transcendent things. But yes, what I think that is, as shared faith has fractured a little bit. You've seen spiritual and emotional energy put into ideological platforms that can't really bear that weight. And so you have people investing not just their municipal future, but their existential future in partisan politics. It's seen as the answer to everything. And as a religious person, I think God is the answer to everything. Right. So it's like they're both totalizing. This is why we're not allowed to talk about religion or politics at cocktail parties, because each has claims that might infringe on your neighbors. The question is, which one has mercy at its core? Right. And I don't think there's much. I don't see much mercy on any side of the way that our current system is set up. It feels like a zero-sum thing, and to admit hesitancy or reservation along these lines is a sign of weakness rather than reflection. So it saddens me. I don't know. I have no answer to the American political.
We thought you were going to solve it.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think politics exerts a pressure on people to get it right and to be as loud as possible in how right you are. And that's a corrosive pressure on the human soul. It's called self-righteousness, and it's what Jesus targeted more than any other personal trait. He also targeted greed. He also targeted, he believed in. There are ways to get to Jesus from all sorts of ideological vantage points. Right. I don't want to say there aren't, but self-righteousness is a spiritual danger that I think is deeply perilous to the actual state of a person's life.
Yeah, I mean, of course, last week I think it was, we had the parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee, right? And that was at the very heart of it. The Pharisee was all, look at me, look how amazing I am. I'm so much better than this other person. We can map a lot of that onto partisan politics too, both ways. Let's open it up to questions, Dave. Yes.
said something earlier about people, how God thinks, and I've always thought it's a problem to humanize God. This is a both of you. What do you think about that? God doesn't really think, does he?
How do you think about the anthropomorphic nature of God?
I think that's true. I think we run a real danger when we overly project onto God a sort of a human psychology.
Right.
We psychoanalyze Jesus. We psychoanalyze God. And what I'm trying to say there is that God is other in some wonderful ways that involve some mystery. And I mean, I wouldn't call myself a mystic, but I can appreciate the fact that God is. There is a peace which passes understanding, and that if I could understand the mind of God, it wouldn't be the mind of God. So, what I'm really trying to say there is that we, in our pain and our fear, we often project onto God a kind of a tit for tat, deserving, calculus, scorekeeping mentality. That my hope is that God is not like just a larger version of me, or a larger version of my mother-in-law. You know, like
Whom you love deeply.
Who I think is fantastic if you're watching this. So that's kind of what I meant. But I also think that God revealed himself in Jesus Christ. And so it's not just the cloud of unknowing. You know, I think that there's something we can know about God, and that's mostly by looking at Jesus. And that's when I look to Jesus, what I see is something is very, very consoling.
Yeah. I mean, it strikes me that if we imagine God as just an extreme or magnified version of a human, we're basically engaging in paganism, right? This is the way in which a god, say, in Greco-Roman culture would have been understood. Just a sort of an immortal, very powerful human who can act in all sorts of whimsical ways, right? But that's not the God of Christianity. The God of Christianity is, as you said, other. And the way I tend to look at it, Dave, I don't know if this resonates with you, but God is truth, love, beauty, the good, these things, the pure essences of these things. And when we see those things in the world, what we see are really sort of shadows of them, shadows of God, people, things participating in God. But we're always kind of journeying to the true pureness of love, goodness, truth, but we won't really see it until the beatific vision, right? Until the kingdom of God comes in its fullness. And in this life, we just see shadows of it. But that way of thinking helps us realize that there is something we're working towards, even though we're only seeing it imperfectly, right? It's sort of a very Platonic way of thinking about it, but I find that helpful, and I think that's, in many ways, the classic Christian idea, even though we tend to, in our culture, think of God as a person up there in the clouds with a beard. But that just leads to paganism, doesn't it, in many ways?
I'm with you. I like to play around in those shadows.
Yeah, right. Yes, question.
Dave, I'm in a group that wrote the book Seculosity years ago. And I'm
For sale over there?
Love that. But we're reading the big relief now. We're halfway through it. And we're in the chapter about control. And you talked about rejection and loneliness. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
On rejection and loneliness? Sure, thank you, Julie. Rejection is not grace. And I think a lot of us are deeply afraid of rejection. And today, I think loneliness is just as much a function. Loneliness is just as much a function of rejection as it is the fear of rejection. And this is something that certainly social media plays into. But it breaks my heart as a middle-aged man to hear about the levels of loneliness, especially among middle-aged men. They're the ones who are largely ending their lives because they're so lonely and isolated. And so I think that there are all sorts of cultural reasons for that, but I believe that grace, when the youth minister talks about grace, is unmerited favor. And I spend my life frightened of rejection. And here I am told that God actually is not another voice rejecting me.
Yeah.
I think that's a very exciting prospect and something I want to foreground in my presentation of the Christian faith. But just as much as these accelerating pressures are part of the spiritual conditions of 2025, so too is loneliness. And you see it in every imaginable sphere. So, God decided not to remain aloof from human beings and to enter in and with this and to embrace rather than to exclude. And I find that to be a message of real urgency. It's one aspect of the diamond. There might be. It's funny. I talk about rates of middle-aged male loneliness, but I have 3 kids, a wife, a big church, and all sorts of friends. So loneliness is not my particular issue right now. Keeping up is, productivity is, status anxiety. These things are very particular to me. But I also have seen enough of my peers to know that loneliness is a major, major thing.
Yeah.
That I don't know if that's part of what you were hoping to get at.
The book says really nice things.
Thank you.
Yes, Paul.
When you look around this room and our investment horizon isn't all that long.
It's a mixed group. Come on, Paul.
Young adults and college students, I know you do. Do those burdens affect those people maybe disproportionately?
The burdens I've been speaking about? I think that probably a little bit. Certainly the acceleration that I talked about is experienced by the college students in a way that is every year kind of getting faster. And I think that what I've noticed since I wrote that seculosity book about replacement religions is I have noticed more and more young people are disillusioned by the replacement religions that they were presented with. And that includes politics, that includes wellness, that includes careerism. I see, as you graduate and you can't afford to buy a house, you can't afford to buy a diamond, you start to feel like, wait, I was sold a false bill of goods. And that I have seen, to my almost surprise, a renewed interest in the Christian faith as something that's got real substance for people today, a re-examination of it. We talk about a revival in this country, but I don't know if I can speak for this country, but my younger brother lives in England and has lived there for 25 years, and he's a professor, and he says all of their churches are filled with 20-somethings. And they weren't prepared for it. No one saw this coming, but they were sort of two generations further than us in terms of secularization, and the disappointment has been that much more severe. But in America, I sometimes think that the level of distraction that technology has afforded us means that people aren't engaging with the deeper questions until a little bit later, because they're under the gun of so many other things, and there's just no mental space to do it. So I'm not a hopeless person at all. I see a lot of wonderful things happening along these lines.
Other questions we have for Dave? Yes, Kai.
As someone who is ingrained and taught and obsessed with keeping scorecards, how does that scorecard look when you make that transformation to say that I'm already accepted, I'm already loved, I've already received this grace? What are the things that tend to replace career and number of zeros in the account and all that? I know we've touched on a lot of them, but just if you could sort of summarize that would be interesting to me.
When the scorecard loses a little bit of its attraction to folks, and scorecards, by the way, they destroy relationships. So, like, if you're in a marriage that is a scorecard, and it's only a scorecard. Every marriage has some scorecard to it. There's no question. There's dishes to be done. I understand. But actually, in this town, there are carpools to be driven, you know? How many times can you drive to Western in one day? But I think that if that's all there is to a relationship, and if that's all there is to a relationship with a child or with a boss, those relationships end. They crash and burn. So you don't really need to judge them because they've already judged themselves. But when the scorecard thing fizzles, and it may not fizzle till you're 75 and you're retired and you look back on your career and you think, what was that all about? What usually comes up for a person is either some form of acting out tantrum, I'm going to do what I've been wanting to do this entire time, or I think more commonly what I see is folks getting in touch with some sort of God-given interest or delight that, so even some form of play, it might not be termed that way, but that is of service to others, that enjoys creation, that is enjoyed for its own sake. And that's, I think, very close to the kingdom of God. When you are not afraid of losing something, you're more willing to give more. When you really enjoy something, you tend to do it better. You tend to do it in ways that are more sacrificial. And so one of the great joys of working at a church, I've now been at Christ Church downtown for 15 years, is I get to see how this sort of stuff, people start to use their gifts in ways that it's always Holy Spirit directed, and it's never quite what you predict, but there are interesting ways that this happens. And you see people who deciding to do a support group for those who've dealt with grief or with suicide or with difficult children or estrangement, things like these. I see it all the time. I see people get really involved in this project or that project. And it may not be some sort of altruistic thing. It might just be they get really into painting. But that's a different form of enrichment and creativity, which is exciting to me.
Yeah, that's great. Let's do one more question for Dave. Final question? Yeah. All right, maybe we can do two. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you share specifically regarding interaction with younger people, an anecdote, specific or broad, that struck you, that maybe gave you hope or maybe concern? Speaking about the younger generation as they're about to move into this world with all the issues that all the pressure you're talking about.
Well, I think when it comes to social media, I think that Jonathan Haidt wrote this week about what young people are asking for, how to get them off their screens. And I don't know any young people that think social media is wonderful. Like almost all of them feel like it's a necessary evil. They're trapped on it and they can't get out. And I'm not sure you would have found that 10 years ago.
Right.
I see spiritual openness. Like I could just tell you, it's hard to. I don't want to sound self-congratulatory, but our student service at Christ Church, we do a 5 p.m. service, and for years it was holding strong at about 180, 190 people because we served dinner afterwards and they like dinner.
Who doesn't, right?
Who likes dinner? But the last year, this past year, without us doing anything, it's blossomed to 300 people, and I don't know what's going on, except for the fact that I think that there's a hunger for something that has been around for longer than 5 years, and a message of hope that transcends reality. And these are mainstream kids; they're not just sort of the God Squad,
Right.
Which I love the God Squad. So I see a lot of hope for that, and the hunger for in-person communication. One of the funny things that we've seen in this generation is as they've gotten more interested in their phones, they've gotten less interested in dating, hanging out. You don't drop kids off at the mall like you did. It's all sort of virtual, and that means that teenage pregnancy is way down, which is great, I guess. But it also means that no one's having actual relationships. So I see a turning of the tide in a way that I don't want to be too optimistic about it, but I also see that among young parents too, who feel like they're just under the gun and need something good in their life that's not just another thing to fail at doing.
There may be some positive signs of an openness to revival.
I see that, and I travel around to a lot of mainline churches, and it's not, people say, oh, this is just a conservative thing. It's not. It's simply not. It's an existential thing.
Right.
And I hope that the church of my youth, which is the Episcopal Church, is like this church and has the courage to actually believe God is real. There's power and love here that is worth investing in.
Amen. Yeah. Richard, do you want to do one question? Yeah, last question.
Just your comment about engaging with maybe the important questions that we all face and understanding our place in life, our relationship to God, our spiritual life. And I certainly have elderly relatives who never did. They kind of skated along the surface of status or accomplishment as they've gotten older and much less able now. They're angry or bitter, or they've even gone past that now. You miss the opportunity. I think what you're saying is important. You have to engage. Take a step back and understand that essentially the drug that is being peddled to make a lot of money peddling drugs. And most social media is exactly like you take a drug. Step away from that. Not be afraid to engage with the larger questions in their life. Try to get that perspective on God, love, truth, beauty, and time to contemplate these things and understand. And that can flow of forgiveness and love, even for the people who disagree.
That's interesting. I think one of the perhaps benefits of social media and the way that our world is set up, this acceleration means that people also burn out a little faster. And so that could be that they're asking those questions a little they can't get to all the way to the end without that. But I see what you're saying. I've watched people age in different directions, and some get bitter and more closed off, and a lot of people though get softer and more open. And I know which one I hope will be me. But I see that, I don't know what else to say. I don't want to, it's the desire to anesthetize and to avoid death, sin, humility, vulnerability. I think that's universal. And I think for a lot of people, they've been able to avoid that through workaholism or just frankly alcohol. But, that these are not new things. Like the grace of God applies just as much to someone who's 85 as it does to someone who's 25. I just want some of these chapters, the last chapter is about captivity to death. And I think that's going to be of a little more interest to someone who's, 85 than to someone who's 25. But status anxiety you might not care anymore about that stuff. A lot of people don't.
Right.
So if the book has been successful, what I hope to hear is that it speaks across demographics and even across spiritual questions.
You could say the gospel is good news, whoever you are, whatever age you are, whatever your life situation. It's right there for you.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
Thanks, Justin. Thank
you, Dave, for being with us. Let's give him a round of applause. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.